Hello, everyone and no one, because that's who it's intended for, and that's who's gonna watch it, respectively. Okay, let's learn some logic. Let's do some basic sentence logic or propositional logic. Sentence logic or propositional logic deals with truth claims, things that may or may not be true. Here we got a true one, a really obvious true one, so true that even my senator seems to acknowledge it. Isn't that nice? Senators who just kind of know things and say things that are true. Not all of them are like that these days. Okay, P says Putin is bad. Now, is this a sentence or is this a proposition? What are we going to work with here? So I want to start here, but you don't need to know this. You don't need to know the difference between sentences and propositions to get the logic. So if you want to skip ahead, that's fine. This is a weird metaphysical point. Why do some people talk about sentences and some people talk about propositions? It's a little weird. Aren't we kind of making things overly complicated? I'm a philosopher. That's what I do. Yeah, okay. So sentences, we know what sentences are, right? This is pretty straightforward. This, boop, is a sentence. It's got a period at the end now, too, right? Now, sentences have a meaning, and the meaning might be different than the sentence itself. Putin is vile means the same thing as Putin is bad. It's just stated a little more harshly, right? So we've got sentences, we've got meanings. Putin est mal in French. Putin is bad. This is an English sentence. This is a French sentence. The meaning of these sentences is the same, okay? The meaning is the same. Now, one thing important about the sentences. Our sentences, we're not going to use logic with any sort of sentences. We're going to use logic with declarative sentences, at least this kind of logic. We might be able to expand it a little bit into imperative sentences when you deal with deontic logic, which has to do with the logic of ought, the logic of should, the logic of must, and so on. But here, when we're doing sentence logic, propositional logic, we're just going to deal with the logic of declarative sentences, sentences that are either true or false. If something is not either true or false, it does not belong here. We can't do logic about it, all right? So we're going to do logic with sentences that are true and false, declarative sentences. The meaning is perhaps what's meant by a proposition. Propositions aren't sentences. Propositions are maybe the meaning of sentences. Why is this distinction important? Well, the distinction is important because some people don't believe in propositions. That sounds weird. If I just said the proposition is the meaning of the sentence, what would it mean to not believe in meanings? What would it mean to not believe in a proposition? Well, suppose you're a physicalist, for instance, and you think that everything in the world needs to be accounted for in terms of material things. Well, sentences you can do. Sentences exist physically. This one exists as, what is this stuff made out of? I don't know. It's the dry erase liquid in certain shapes on the board, right? That's what the sentence is. It's a physical thing. You can point to it. The meaning of a sentence, it might be something that exists in the brain. But the proposition, for instance, that these two have in common, it gets tricky to talk about propositions in strictly physical terms. So propositions are largely taken to be, in some way, extra physical. They're beyond the physical world. We're talking about meanings of things. We're talking about sentences in this kind of Platonic sense where we can somehow, with our minds, reach up to meanings and tie them to this and tie them to that. And so some people feel uncomfortable talking about propositions. Uh, Especially if you're thinking about logic as something that you're going to kind of take into computation. Logic is something that you want to instantiate in the physical world through computer science. You might be uncomfortable thinking about what we're talking about in terms of propositions, and you might be more comfortable sticking with sentences, and that's fine. But if you want to talk about propositions as the meaning of the sentence, right? That Putin is bad. That would be a state of affairs. Usually talking about that Putin is bad. That's a fact about the world. But facts also, right? What do we do with these facts or meanings or propositions? States of affairs are physical. They're the way the world is, right? They're the arrangement of physical things in the world. Sentences are physical, of course, whether they're written or whether they're spoken, carried through vibrations in the world. They're physical. But meanings and propositions might be extra physical. If you don't want to take... Who wants to have positions on this stuff, really? I mean, I get it. Some people do. Some people really care about that stuff. Some people not so much. I tend to think that our words are clouding our understanding of what's real in some ways here. I don't know.